It is September, and that means the season of the witch is officially upon us. And to get us in the mood, we are hosting a podcast replay series for you this week here on Expedition to Soul. So, this is a 3-part series where you are going to hear about past lives, ancestors, and even dive into some of my personal ghost stories. So, this is the week of September 2nd. And these replays will be posted on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of this week if you're listening to this live in real time. If you're here from the future, coming in the machine back in time, welcome in. Enjoy the series. And hey, while you're here, if you haven't yet registered for our autumn equinox sacred shadow event, go ahead and do that. It starts in just a couple of weeks. All right. Enjoy the replays, and we'll be back next week with live episodes for you. If the word witch makes you feel full of power and excitement, if you love personal development but loathe boring love and light conversation, if a sexy combo of witchery and inner work piques your interest, you're in the right place. Welcome home, Magic Maker, and welcome to Expedition to Soul, the podcast brought to you by the Sisters Enchanted. All right, this is part 3 of our Ancestors, Past Lives, and Ghost podcast series. Oh my goodness, this has been a fun one. Now today, when we talk about ghosts, here's what I invite you to do. Have an open mind. Also, I don't know, everybody believes different things. It's my belief that we have nothing to fear here, which I know is not everybody else's belief. There are some famous ghost people like the Warrens. And I think you might have heard about that haunted doll and whatnot. I mean, there's some wild stories out there. And I don't think people are lying. And I will also say that I've never had one of those experiences. So today's podcast episode is based on my personal experiences. I don't believe that there's just like evil lurking around every corner. I just don't believe that. So there you go. There's my disclaimer for today. Believe what you will, think what you will, and just enjoy, I guess. Okay, we're going to talk about ghosts. Now, an interesting question I got to thinking about was, because the last episode was on past lives. If we have past lives, right, and then we reincarnate and come back to a new life, how are there ghosts? I don't know. These are the answers. I don't know. Maybe some of them just have not reincarnated. Maybe they chose not to. Maybe they're in life between lives. And maybe it's just like a blueprint that sticks behind. I don't know. I never thought about that till this very moment. So not a question I'm here to answer. And I'm not really looking for an answer, actually. So they should, I don't need an answer. It's just something that I came to mind when I sat down to do this just now. So let's talk a little bit about like different ways that folks have communicated with ghosts or spirits. One thing that you'll see is mediums. That's probably the most popular thing, right? There's TV shows, radio shows. Mediums are very popular. I am friends with some mediums. I think that mediumship and folks who are natural born mediums, or people who train and open up that skill, or people who stumble upon it, are definitely a talented bunch. And I think are also misunderstood. I think when folks think of mediums, you think that they can just like ask your past loved ones any question and just know all this stuff. Like you could ask them where, what was the code for whatever, or where was this book hidden, or where was this in my house, and try to like test or trip up a medium. Well, mediumship doesn't work that way. Now, that's not saying that occasionally a medium might not know that information, because maybe it is forthcoming. But by and large, mediums receive messages, or they can ask questions and can interpret back the message. But if you listen to my past life episode, then you heard me say that people will interpret information based on what they are able to interpret and understand, right? So A medium who has not seen a certain symbol before, they can maybe try to describe it in the best way that they can, but if they've never been introduced to it or they don't know what it is, it's not likely that they're just going to be able to like spit out the exact words that you're looking for. That's not how mediumship works. Again, they are receiving through the language, the visuals, the words they understand, and then they are interpreting that back for you. My friend Tracy, she is a medium, and she was describing once a story about how she was doing a reading for some women, and Tracy's a research medium, so she's been studied and verified by an independent institution as an accurate medium. And they were like really looking for a specific like thing, right? Like a specific answer. And she just wasn't like getting that answer for them. So then they were leaving, and she was doing this in person. I might be mixing up the story a little bit, but it was something about like a boat or a ship. And they saw a painting or like a model she had, and they pointed it out. And when she saw it, that's when she was like, oh. And then she said the thing, and they were like, that was what they were looking for. But the way they were asking and what was coming through was not aligning with this, right? And it took that random, it probably wasn't random at all, but that interaction of them pointing out this photo or the picture, whatever it was, and then her saying, there it is, and then saying the word that made the connection. So that is, mediumship is not an exact like accurate thing. It is really not even about accuracy. It's about messages coming through. And just like anything else, we have to be open to receive them and release our expectation to outcome, to have an experience with that is useful, healing, and that teaches us, from the experience. In the late 1800s in New York, there was a, I guess, you can find these churches still today. You might have heard of the spiritualism movement. Maybe you haven't. But the idea with that movement was, it was popular in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the idea was that the folks could, again, be mediums, channel, speak to spirit, folks who've come before, with the idea that those people who had passed, their energies were continuously evolving and could connect basically to God or speak to the higher power, and that we could speak to them and get messages from the higher power. And so the spiritualist movement, spiritualism as a religion, was really popular in wealthier communities, in European wealthy communities in, again, the late 1800s, early 1900s, and sort of fizzled out as folks, you could see, I think, easily how people could misconstrue somebody who's a medium or a false medium, somebody who's really just taking advantage of people. And so that didn't gain a very strong hold, long lasting, but there still are spiritualist churches in the US today. So if that's something you're interested in, give it a Google. You'll probably find one. They still exist. And that is another way that we see this living and the dead coming together. Let me tell you about my experiences with ghosties, and some stories and different ways that my connection with those who've passed has grown over the years, and what I do to invite to invite those circumstances, or to just not invite those circumstances. One of the things, okay, let me tell you the story about the first time that I knew for damn sure that I was looking at a ghost or a spirit, whatever you want to call it, the first time I knew for sure. So I was working in a room in my house, and I was by myself, and I looked over, and I basically saw like what I knew. Now, when I say saw, it's more of a knowing, right? Like I couldn't say that it was like a figure in the room. It was like a knowing that it was there, and a knowing that it was a man, and definitely at least middle-aged, if not older, but not like a cardboard cutout, it's a knowing for me, more of just a, oh my gosh, a knowing. So I look over, and there's this like
knowing of this man. And this is the wild part of the story. So the man is peeing into a coffee can. Now I don't see, like, again, it's a knowing. There's no like anatomical parts here. I just like know that's what's happening. And I was a little wigged out, as you can imagine. So but I also was not, I knew I wasn't in danger, right? Like I just, again, a knowing, a feeling. And my husband, he is not a witchy guy. He's not particularly into things like ghosts. He's just, kind of average Joe. And I was like, all right. And this figure was in a closet that did not have a door on it because we had been doing some work and the door needed to be shortened to be put back in because we put in a carpet where there was not a carpet. So I went to my husband and I said, I have something to tell you, and you're going to think that I've gone off the deep end, and I just want you to hear me, just hear what I'm saying. So I told him that I just saw this ghost and it was peeing in a coffee can. Now, something you all might, some background before I tell you the end of this story, and you're going to probably guess the end through this. My husband, the house that we live in, it's been in his family, and we're now the owners of this house. But my husband used to work on this house with his grandfather when he was a young adult, and they did some work on it. And his grandfather passed away very suddenly when we were first dating, and I never met him. And they were very close, though. So I told my husband the story, and he looked at me, and it wasn't coffee cans, but tobacco cans. His grandfather was a pipe smoker. And he said, my grandfather used to pee into tobacco cans and put it in the yard to try to keep the deer away. And I was like, oh my gosh, that tracks. I think that's who it was. And it was so, and my husband totally was like, I believe it. And the room that I was working in used to be a garage that we had turned into a room. So it used to be the garage, and it would stand to reason that he would do that kind of activity in the garage. So anywho, that was my first like knowing. From then on, and I will say that to this day, his name is Corky, and he, I think, still is amongst our house, causing chaos from time to time. When folks house sit are here, they'll report how things were in one place and then they were in another place. Just the other day, we have an electronic door lock, and we can track how the door gets opened. And I went to unlock the door for someone coming over, and the door was already unlocked. And so I asked my husband, did you unlock that door? Because I know the kids didn't. It was early in the day. And he said no. So he opened up the thing, and it marks as a manual unlock inside the house 10 minutes before I went to unlock it. And we were like, no one unlocked that door. And it's also loud because it's electronic. So if it gets unlocked electronically, it makes a really loud noise. And you can hear it because my house is small and you can hear it like across the house. So just things like that happen here frequently. So we're pretty sure that Corky is here with us, amongst us, and hanging out. So hello, Corky, if you're listening to this. Hopefully you don't muck up anything on my podcast today in jest. Apparently he was a fun-loving guy. Anyway, that was my first experience. So from then, this happened more frequently, where I would be in a situation where maybe other people were kind of getting an energy from a place or a house, and I would just kind of breathe and invite in, say, well, is there someone here? And again, for me, it's really it's almost like my mind is seeing it. It's a clear knowing, like looking at, in one house I was in, everybody was like, this house is haunted. And I just looked in the doorway and I'm like, oh yes, there's a little girl here. She's in the doorway. And it's just a clear knowing for me, a clear knowing. Now, in those situations where I have this knowing of a presence, I don't receive messages. It's just a knowing of a presence. I'm not getting messages. So recently I was ghost hunting at the Lizzie Borden house. If you've not heard that story, it's a tale in Massachusetts. It's not a tale, it's a real life thing that happened. And these daughters lived with their dad and stepmother, and they were both murdered, the dad and stepmother. And there's a lot around it, but one of the people in question, and really the most likely person who would have murdered them, would have been their daughter Lizzie. But there's a lot of other things that don't make sense about that either. And so it was an unsolved case. She did go to trial and was acquitted, and it was unsolved. But the house that it happened in, you can go and stay in it. And I've actually stayed in it twice. Once when it was a bed and breakfast, and now it is owned by like a ghost hunting company, and they definitely make it like a really kitschy ghost hunting experience. Like they make a vibe out of it, and they hand out all these tools, and the person who's there at night, like really, she'll like try to stir up like negative ghosts. And for somebody like me who really thinks that that's not typical and who had slept in the house before, I kind of find it, to be honest, like a little off-putting. It's like, I think you need to settle down. I'm trying to stir up ghosts here. But for me, in that instance, again, it was more of a knowing, and I felt like there was like a toddler, like a little girl energy, sort of like a toddler, kind of just like playful, like wanting to, not even noticing that there were people in the house, just kind of like running around. But so yeah, that's my experience with, I guess, entities, you would say, or knowings of ghosts. Now, mediumship, though, for me is very different, and I will not claim to be a medium. I've had mediumship experiences, but I have not like trained. I've not tried to grow in them. So when I have them, I don't usually know I'm having them. I'm usually delivering a message to somebody, like a psychic message or an intuitive message, and then they'll say like, hot damn, that is not an intuitive message. That is very much so-and-so from my life. And typically for me, it's I'm giving, I'll see something and I'll tell them. So in some cases, the most, a couple of months back or so, maybe like close to a year ago now. I don't do a lot of readings anymore, or like any for that matter, but I was doing one for somebody in a program that we have, and I was giving a past life reading actually. And I said, well, I see you like doing glass blowing over a fire in this barn. And this person just like, was astonished because it was a personal connection and actually had done glass blowing in this life, but to honor somebody who had passed. And so I see through like connections like that. Or in one case, I saw like yellow, and I was like, it's like running yellow, running, moving fast. I think it's running sneakers, yellow, moving fast. It's going really fast. And then somebody in the room their father had a yellow barracuda, and was like, and then I pulled out initials, and it was their father's initials. So for me, it happens in this way, like a lot of symbols, letters, and just like a nod to the spirit as opposed to a message from the spirit. So I think that when it comes to ghosts, if you are a person who like would love to have a ghost encounter, self-trust, same with past lives, being open, and not being afraid, I think is key, which with all of the things that are on, like, TV around ghosts in particular, it's always like angry ghosts, like demonic possessions. I don't know, like scary stuff. I never watch that stuff ever. And if you want to open yourself to like an energy, I would recommend not doing it. Like I wouldn't do that, because you'll just be afraid. And if you're afraid, you're not going to open yourself up to it. Now, this leads me to some tools for connection if you do want to do this. Now, this episode, I think, is airing on Halloween. I'm recording it in advance, so I think it's airing on Halloween. So if this is something you want to do today in particular, you can use tarot cards to do mediumship readings. It's similar as past life, like ask questions. You could even ask like about any energies of a house or a land or a relative to come through. So you can use tarot for this. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about, people have feelings about big feelings. So when this goes out on the internet, I don't need to hear the big feelings, but people have big feelings about spirit boards, like Ouija boards. Now, the first thing I want to say about that is that the actual Ouija board is made by like Mattel on the same factory lines that they make Monopoly. So, I don't know, if you're afraid of the Ouija board out of a box, perhaps you should be afraid of your Monopoly money because they're made on the same thing. There's not like some, esoteric factory making Ouija boards. They're the same cardboard, different paper on top, and same boxes, different labels. So that's the first thing I'll say about that. The second thing I will say is that anything only has the power you give it. So if you pick up a book, like even the Bible, right? It is a book until you have a connection to it, a belief in it. You've given it power. You trust in the stories of it. You trust that it's a connection to your higher power. That is not different than anything else, any other tool. It's your like connection, your belief. So for me, when I am actively trying to say, is there somebody here who wants to be like acknowledge or come through and say hi to somebody, I will use a spirit board, but I will use it to find a name or initials, like yes, no questions. And I'll use a pendulum for it. And I will sort of move it around and like, again, feeling my energy, the connection, my pendulum to get the initials. So I do use one of those tools. And actually, often I don't even use a spirit board. I'll just write the alphabet out and just do it that way. So if you really are like, I don't know, I've heard some things, I have some feelings, you can just write out the alphabet or use like ABC cards and you have the same sort of thing, which is again what makes me so wild about these beliefs around things like spirit boards, because it's just the ABCs and, there you go. So you can do something like that. So tarot, just your own intuitive skills, your like a spirit board or just writing out letters, for example. And again, though, I think it comes back to self-trust. Now, how does this tie in? And the veil is thinning. It is this liminal time, and it said it's easier to connect to spirit right now. And I think that, for you, maybe you just want to connect to a loved one, or maybe you don't. Maybe you want to just see, is there any energy in this house or this place where I am? Anything that wants to just be acknowledged on this day, this time of liminality, the time when the veil is thinner. And you can certainly do this here. But I think that sometimes in our own experiences here on earth, we are afraid to move forward, or we might have hidden fears that we don't know that we have. And like maybe aren't so comfortable because we don't know things, and trying practices like these can just help you break out of your comfort zone and again strengthen your own self-trust. Maybe just ask some new questions of yourself, like what thoughts have you been holding on to? What stories have you been holding on to? And certainly this ties back into your ancestor work, because you can, if you have stories from your ancestors and you're just really looking for some validation, or you're looking for comfort, or perhaps like in my case, my house was like feeling really wild for a bit. And before I had that encounter with my husband's grandfather, and we were trying to figure out like, what is the energy of this house? And I think it was just acknowledgement. As soon as I acknowledged it, the house felt lighter again. So, whatever it is, maybe it's just curiosity. Maybe you just want to listen. Maybe you love to hear ghost stories. However that is for you, definitely something to think about. So today's a great day for that. We all feel a little bit more wild and free and ghost hunter-ish on Halloween, I think. So go on with your bad self. Again, I think that everything is intention, what we bring to a situation. And I definitely would not watch those scary ghost shows if you already have fears. If you already feel a little reserved about the topic. So in this episode, I talked to you some about my experience with ghosts and messages, how it happens for me. I shared ghost stories and why you might want to explore this for yourself. And I think doing all this work, like intuitive work, ancestor work, past lives, connecting with a spirit or something outside of yourself, is also all a great exercise in self-trust. Every single bit of it, I think, will grow your self-trust in wild ways. And so many of us, we yearn to do things in our lives and we don't do them because we don't trust ourselves. And this is a great way to practice doing that.
If you love the podcast, be sure to leave us a rating or a review. That helps us to get the word out about all we're doing here at the Sisters Enchanted. Thanks for being part of our community, and we'll see you in the next episode.